There's something about childhood memories that sticks with you, isn't there? Even the ones that don't make sense, especially those. The older I get, the harder it is to shake some of the things I saw or thought I saw as a kid. Memories that make me question what's real and what isn't. Tonight I want to take you into that part of my mind, the part where shadows linger and the past refuses to let go. This isn't just a story. It's a glimpse into the moments that shaped me, haunted me, and made me the person I am today. For me, it started with a night I'll never forget. I must have been around 8 years old, maybe 9. It was one of those nights where the house was completely silent. Everyone was asleep, and the world felt like it had paused. I don't know what woke me up, but when I opened my eyes, I noticed my bedroom door. It was closed when I went to sleep, but now it was moving. Slowly, so slowly, it creaked open, as if someone was on the other side, pushing it just enough to let it swing on its own. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. My body felt frozen, my tiny frame sinking into the mattress under the weight of sheer terror. I stared at the door, waiting for something or someone to step inside, but nothing happened. No footsteps. No shadow. Just that door wide open and the heavy, suffocating feeling that I wasn't alone. I remember squeezing my eyes shut, trying to will myself back to sleep, but it didn't work. That feeling lingered. It was like the darkness itself had come alive, pressing down on me, whispering without words. Even now, thinking back to that moment, I can feel it. The cold, the silence, the dread. It's been years, but the memory hasn't faded. If anything, it's only gotten sharper, like it's waiting for me to figure out what really happened that night. And that wasn't the only time. Not even close. There was another moment, maybe a year later. It was a warm afternoon, one of those quiet, lazy days where everything feels still. I was in the backyard, playing alone. I can't even remember what I was doing, probably digging in the dirt or building something out of sticks. It doesn't matter. What matters is what I felt. Out of nowhere, I got this overwhelming sensation that I wasn't alone. You know that feeling when someone's staring at you? That's what it was. Except it was more than that. It was like being watched and being warned all at once. I stopped what I was doing and looked around. Nothing. Just the yard, the trees, the fence. But the feeling didn't go away. It was sharp, electric, crawling up my spine and settling in the pit of my stomach. I turned again, slower this time, scanning every inch of the space around me. Still nothing. But I knew, deep down, that something was there. Just out of sight. Just beyond the edges of what I could see. That night, I told my parents. I said I felt like someone was in the yard with me. They laughed, of course. Just your imagination, they said. And maybe they were right. Maybe it was just a kid's mind running wild. But it didn't feel like imagination. It felt real. Too real. For weeks after that, I avoided the backyard. I'd make excuses to stay inside, or I'd stick close to the house if I had to go out. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had been there was still waiting. And the strangest part, every time I closed my eyes, I could almost see it. Not clearly, but enough to know it wasn't human. A shape. A shadow. Something I couldn't explain. As I got older, I tried to make sense of these memories. I read about how kids' minds can play tricks on them, how fear can twist reality. There's this theory about how our brains, especially when we're young, try to fill in the gaps of what we don't understand. A creaking door becomes a ghost. A strange noise becomes a monster. It's all just our imagination, right? But no matter how much logic I applied, the feelings didn't go away. That cold, unshakable dread is still there. It's like those memories are etched into me, a part of who I am. They've shaped how I see the world, how I interact with it. Even now, I find myself drawn to the strange and the unexplained, always searching for answers. Maybe that's why I created this channel, to confront the fears that once haunted me, and in some way, to take control of them. Over the years, I've tried revisiting the places tied to those memories. The bedroom where the door creaked open, the backyard where I felt that presence. I thought maybe if I went back, I'd find some closure, but all I've found are more questions. The places feel different now, emptier somehow. It's like the energy that was there, the thing that made those moments so terrifying, is gone. Or maybe it's just hiding, waiting for the right moment to resurface. And then there are the dreams. I don't have them often, but when I do, they're vivid. In one, I'm back in my childhood bedroom. The door is closed, just like it was that night. But this time, when it creaks open, I see something. A shadowy figure, tall and thin, with eyes that seem to glow. It doesn't move. It just stands there, staring at me. I wake up drenched in sweat, my heart racing, and for a few seconds, I'm 8 years old again, frozen in fear. I've talked to other people about their childhood fears, and it's amazing how many of us carry these memories like invisible scars. Maybe it's because as kids, we're so much more vulnerable. The world is big and strange, and we don't understand most of it. Or maybe, just maybe, kids are more attuned to things adults can't see. Things we're not supposed to see. I don't know what I believe. All I know is that those moments from my childhood feel as real to me now as they did then. They've stayed with me, shaped me, and in a strange way, they've become a part of me. The fear, the curiosity, the need to understand, it's all still there. Imagination can be a beautiful thing when you're a kid, but sometimes it can also be your worst enemy. I learned that the hard way when I was about 6 years old. Back then, I had this irrational but deeply rooted fear of the dark. It wasn't just about not being able to see. It was about what I imagined could be hiding in the shadows. Every night felt like stepping into a battlefield where I had to fight my own mind. I had this recurring nightmare, one that visited me so often it felt like an uninvited guest. In the dream, I was lying in bed just like in real life, and the room was pitch black. At first, everything was quiet. But then I'd hear a low, guttural growl coming from the corner of the room. I'd turn my head, and there it was, a creature barely visible but undeniably there. Its eyes glowed faintly, 2 pinpricks of light cutting through the darkness. It never moved, never came closer, but I could feel its presence, heavy and suffocating, like it was daring me to look away. Every time I woke up from that dream, I'd be drenched in sweat, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I'd lie there, staring at the ceiling, too scared to close my eyes again, but also too terrified to look around the room. What if it was still there? What if this time it wasn't just a dream? That fear didn't stay confined to my dreams. It bled into my waking life, twisting the simplest things into sources of dread. My closet, for example. During the day, it was just a closet, a place to store clothes and toys. But at night, it became a portal to something else, something wrong. I'd stare at the door, half expecting it to creak open and reveal. Well, I didn't know what. That was the worst part, not knowing. My imagination filled in the blanks with things too horrible to describe. I remember one night in particular when the fear became unbearable. I was lying in bed, clutching my blanket like it was a shield, when I heard a noise. It was soft, almost imperceptible, but in the dead silence of the night it was deafening. A rustling sound, like fabric being dragged across the floor. My eyes darted to the closet door. It was still closed, but the noise was coming from inside. I was sure of it. I wanted to scream for my parents, but the fear paralyzed me. What if the noise stopped when they came in? They'd think I was imagining things. Worse, what if whatever was inside the closet decided to come out while I was screaming? The seconds stretched into what felt like hours. Finally, I mustered up the courage to reach for the lamp on my bedside table. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely turn the switch. But when the light flooded the room, the noise stopped. The closet was just a closet again. Harmless, ordinary, but I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. Looking back, I've tried to understand what fueled those fears. Psychologists say that children have vivid imaginations because their brains are still developing. They're trying to make sense of the world. And when they encounter something they don't understand, their minds fill in the gaps. That's why a shadow on the wall becomes a monster, or a strange noise becomes proof of something sinister. It's not that kids are irrational. It's that their imaginations are so powerful they can blur the line between what's real and what isn't. But even with that explanation, I can't shake the feeling that there was more to it. The fear felt too real, too visceral. It wasn't just in my head, it was in my body, in my bones. And maybe that's why those memories have stayed with me. They've left an imprint, a reminder of how small and vulnerable I once was. As I grew older, the fear of the dark gradually faded. I learned to tell myself that there was nothing to be afraid of, that monsters weren't real. And yet, even now, there are moments when I'm alone in the dark and I feel that old, familiar dread creeping back. It's like a whisper from the past, reminding me of a time when the world was full of shadows and my imagination was both my greatest gift and my greatest curse. So here's my question to you. What did you fear as a child? What was the thing that kept you awake at night? The shadow that loomed largest in your mind? And more importantly, do you still feel its presence even now? Let's explore the power of our imaginations together. Because sometimes the scariest things aren't the ones we can see, but the ones we create in our own minds. There's a peculiar way childhood memories cling to us, isn't there? Like threads woven into our very being, pulling tight when we least expect it. For me, those threads are darker than most. They're not just memories but echoes, whispers of fear and wonder that have shaped the person I've become. And no matter how many years pass, those shadows refuse to fully let go. I used to think I could outrun them, bury them beneath layers of logic and reason. After all, we grow up, don't we? We learn to dismiss the creaks in the night, the shadows in the corner of our vision, as tricks of the mind. But here's the truth no one tells you. Some things never really leave. They change shape, burrow deeper, and resurface when you least expect it. When I was a kid, the world felt enormous and mysterious. Every shadow, every unexplained noise was proof of something more, something unseen. Those nights spent clutching my blanket, heart pounding, didn't just fade away. They left marks. As I grew older, I realized those moments had taught me something important. The world is as much about what we feel as it is about what we see. And feelings? They have a way of lingering. Even now, as an adult, I find myself drawn to the unexplainable. I'll catch myself staring into the dark corners of a room, half expecting or maybe hoping to see something staring back. It's not fear anymore, not exactly. It's curiosity. I need to understand what I've spent my whole life trying to make sense of. Those childhood fears didn't just shape my nights, they shaped my mind. They made me question, explore, dig deeper. But there's a cost to carrying those shadows. For years, I struggled with anxiety, though I didn't have the words for it back then. It's not easy to explain to someone who hasn't felt it. How do you describe the weight of something you can't see? The way your heart races at nothing. Your mind spirals over things that aren't there. Those childhood fears were like seeds, and in adulthood, they blossomed into something far more complicated. I've had to learn to navigate that weight, to live with it rather than fight it. Meditation helped. So did therapy. But the biggest change came when I stopped running from those memories and started facing them. I began to write them down, to talk about them, to let them exist instead of trying to bury them. That's when I realized something powerful. Those shadows weren't just sources of fear. They were sources of strength. You see, those fears taught me to be resilient, to face the unknown even when it terrified me. They made me question everything, to look deeper and think critically. And perhaps most importantly, they made me empathetic. Because once you've stared into your own darkness, you start to recognize it in others. You understand that everyone carries shadows, even if they don't talk about them. Acknowledging those memories, processing them instead of suppressing them, has been a journey. But it's one that's given me a greater understanding of myself. I've come to see those childhood fears not as curses, but as gifts. They've shaped my worldview, my personality, my approach to life. They've taught me to find beauty in the unknown, to embrace the questions rather than fear them. So now I want to pass that challenge on to you. Think back to your own childhood. What are the memories that still linger? The fears you've carried into adulthood. You don't run from them. Face them. Acknowledge them. Because those memories, those unseen threads, are a part of who you are. And when you start to untangle them, you might just discover that they've been holding you together all along. The shadows of our past don't have to define us, but they can guide us. They can teach us. And sometimes, if we're willing to look closely enough, they can even set us free. So take a deep breath, step into the dark, and see what you find. You might be surprised by the light waiting on the other side.